Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of a man this time, a gentleman who is gracing us with his story. As you know, Her Story Circle is all inclusive. 25% of my guests are men. So welcome to the tribe, John. Please introduce yourself. Tell everybody where you are and your full name, and share your story with us today.
Very much. Thank you, Gertrude, for that introduction. I'm delighted to be here. First, may I say that I'm going to share my story, which is a cancer story. There is no handbook of how to deal with a cancer diagnosis, no rule book to guide you. You learn as you go along. So this is my story. I do firmly believe that every cancer patient does have a story. You will find that my story is quite unique. It's a three-dimensional story, which I will now convey to you. So I was born in South Shields on the northeast coast of England 69 years ago, where my childhood was very happy but uneventful. I then left school with a handful of worthless qualifications and started work in a local shipyard. During those early 70s, the joyous sound of excitement and adventure followed me around the country like a dog chasing its own tail, as I followed space rock legends Hawkwind from city to city. But as I travelled to the next venue, staying night after night in dingy bed and breakfasts, where the smell clung to the walls like a second wallpaper, splashed with notes of sour milk and old socks stitched together, and then the sharp stink of cheap disinfectant which drifted through the hallways in slow, heavy waves. But as that rock music seeped into my veins, an inexplicable fatigue started to consume my every movement. Furthermore, I'd noticed that I'd been losing weight like a candle burning in a bright room, which initially I hadn't noticed until the flame got smaller and smaller. Only then did I notice that the light had dimmed, and I realized that my feeble frame was being attacked by something. But I had no idea what it was. Returning to work, which I needed to do in order to fund my travels around the country following Hawkwind, I struggled with the manual labour of the heavy shipbuilding industry, and eventually I collapsed at work. Something had me in a deathly stranglehold and was refusing to let go, but I had no idea what it was. And little did I know that it was about to shape my future and my philosophy right up to the present day. And so I was admitted to a local hospital where a barrage of tests revealed that I had stage 4 cancer, lymphocyte depleted Hodgkin lymphoma to be precise. And at the time, my parents were taken to one side and told that my chances of survival were very slim. So from being a carefree spirit, that initial diagnosis placed me firmly on a roller coaster of emotional turbulence, where fear didn't just arrive, it crawled under my skin and refused to leave. It sat in my chest, heavy and constant, turning every thought into a worst case scenario, and I just couldn't escape it. Every quiet moment gave it more space to grow. It made the future feel unsafe, like something was slipping out of my own control and I had no way to stop it. My life was about to take off, sadly, on a trajectory that was filled with unimaginable challenges, breathtaking comebacks, and a deep, deep spiritual journey. The first round of chemotherapy felt like the moment my innocence had been ripped from my body. The drugs didn't just work on my body, they pulled my mind into dark, unfamiliar places where exhaustion, pain, and the stench of fear tangled together. I felt stripped back to something fragile, barely recognizing the person I was becoming. And I guess if I sat here all day, I don't believe I have the descriptive adjectives in my vocabulary to describe the assault on my feeble frame, and most importantly, the attack on my psychological well-being. There were moments when it all felt too much, when the weight of it pressed so heavily that I didn't know how to keep moving forward. And each treatment of this chemical straitjacket took something from me, chipping away at my strength, my positivity, and most importantly, my sense of control. It pushed me to the edge of what I thought I could endure, forcing me to confront parts of myself that I didn't even know existed. The brutality of those drugs took me to nightmarish places, both physically and mentally, and I have no shame at all in admitting that on more than one occasion, I even contemplated suicide. Excuse me. And yet, even in the darkness, something in me refused to completely give way. I kept going, not because I felt strong, but because stopping didn't feel like a viable option. What I did lose in innocence, I began to replace slowly and painfully with something else: inspiration and a resilience I never asked for, but which I found in a book called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by D. Brown. A magnificent look at the indigenous people of North America, especially the Lakota Sioux Nation. These people, in face of ruthless adversity, repression, and attack, they showed such bravery, a pride, and a resilience that I now wanted to mirror myself. As the chemotherapy was ongoing, after a few months, it was obvious that the first treatment had failed to work, and the cancer returned to taunt me. Or that's the way I felt. It felt like being hauled briefly to the surface after drowning, the lungs gasping for the borrowed air that I needed, only to be dragged back under by an unseen monster. The cancer was no longer an illness, but a relentless tide, removing the fragile sandcastles that I was beginning to build. Sandcastles of hope, I called them. Another course of chemotherapy started, and yet I relapsed again. My horizon narrowed, and what once looked like a distant storm became a sky of uncertainty, a permanent sky of uncertainty, if you like, pressing lower and heavier until the light seemed out of my reach. By the third and then the fourth relapse, I was less a patient, more of a battlefield that was abandoned by mercy. My body became the combat zone, scarred, scorched, and sown with debris of chemical warfare. It was no longer an enemy at the gates, but something deep inside my body, and I was unsure whether it was calling for me to be rescued, or if it was looking for my surrender. Time lost its rhythm and days, and those days didn't pass so much as accumulate, just like the ash after a fire, refusing to die. After each chemotherapy, each relapse was another blowing wind that would rekindle that cancerous flame. There was little of my body remaining, at least not of little of my body remaining of whom I'd been before the diagnosis. I wasn't living between treatments, I was surviving between collapses. And then came a quiet reckoning. When my mortality no longer prowled at the edge of time, it stood tall, blocking my way. I don't think it was a sudden confrontation, but more of a slow tightening of a noose woven from that prognosis. My exhaustion and unbearable weight of that repetition of failed treatments. I stood on the brink, certainly not as a hero, but as a witness to my own downfall. Staring into that void, not with defiance, but with a hollow clarity of someone who'd run out of illusions and had to finally measure up the cost of being alive. It was at this point that palliative chemotherapy was commenced. The aim now was to treat my symptoms. And so in March 1977, I started single-agent vinblastine, a drug that was almost absent of side effects. And these injections continued until late August, when I took a recuperation visit to visit some relatives in North Carolina. On my return, I was admitted to Newcastle General Hospital for the most important investigations of my life. I now had to wait. That wait was like a suspended fall, as though time itself had been stretched across a rack, and I was on that rack too. The final night before getting the results, fear circled in my mind. Dark, unwanted thoughts picked at every fragile part of my psychological being, leaving nothing untouched, the fear uncontrollable. My mind became a storm-locked sky, heavy with questions that I couldn't answer, but I repeatedly asked myself. Entering the hospital on that Thursday morning, the walk down the corridor felt like crossing a narrow bridge over an endless abyss. Each step weighted with everything I'd endured and everything I stood to lose. I couldn't look up, as though meeting the world head-on might shatter what little resolve I had left. And then, like a curtain torn open, there he stood, Dr. Atkinson. He smiled and he raised his arms before saying, "You're clear, all bloody clear."
Wow.
Excuse me. Those words struck like a thunderstorm that shattered the suffocating silence that I was enduring. In that split second, the darkness didn't fade, it just escaped, as if chased out by a force too sudden, too powerful to resist. Excuse me. Clearly still a very emotional recollection. But hope didn't just return that day, it flooded in. It was better than winning any lottery that I could imagine. I was overwhelmed, just disorientated. After years of living under this siege, the silence of survival felt very foreign, like stepping out of a war zone into a world that had continued without me. The question lingered, fragile and very uncertain. Could I truly leave this cancer behind? Yet somewhere beneath that disbelief in my own mind, something did stir, something tentative but insistent. The first roots of life no longer defined by the shadow of cancer. At last I was reaching towards a light. Could I finally put this cancer experience behind me? It was now time to move on with my life. And yet freedom from cancer, when it finally came, it didn't feel like an open sky, but like I was stepping out of a prison. The walls still echoing all around. I'd never been told as a result of the treatment that I would be rendered infertile. And in a knee-jerk reaction, almost wanting to conform to society's demands, I got married. But it was built on unsteady ground, a construction raised too quickly in the shadow of my survival. And although it was destined to fail, we eventually adopted a little girl, Donna. She was small, luminous, and wholly unexpected. A light kindled not by blood, but by choice. For a time, she felt like the proof that life could be rewritten and that I could move on with my life. Something tender. But fate, cruel in its symmetry, returned like an old adversary wearing a different face. My 4-year-old daughter, Donna, was diagnosed with terminal leukemia. She too endured the brutality of chemotherapy. And despite a dire prognosis, as parents, we were told that she wouldn't survive. This was 6 months after her chemotherapy. But she did. Where I'd once been battered into endurance, she rose like something unbreakable through the same merciless storm. And again, if I sat here all day, I could not describe the helplessness of sitting watching Donna have the chemotherapy. She surged forward, turning her suffering into success. And as she grew stronger, she wanted to learn to swim. She did that and became very, very proficient. And eventually, she represented Team GB in the World Swimming Championships in New Zealand in 1998. Very much as the weakest member of the team, she came home with 2 silver medals, making me the proudest dad in the world. Sorry.
What an incredible journey you have been on, John.
Proof that even in the darkest inheritances, things can be reshaped by something, very fierce. In 1988, I returned
I'm going to stop you there so I can ask questions and we'll progress the story with questions now. What kept you going when the odds were against you? When people hear the C word, you jump to the worst possible scenario. What kept you positive? What kept you going?
I firmly believe the history, the pride, the resilience of those Lakota people. I think in life we all need some kind of motivation, some kind of inspiration. And although, as I said, in my darkest moments, I did contemplate suicide, I got an escapism from the music of Hawkwind, but more so than that, I got this sense of being part of the Lakota Nation, the Sioux people who, in face of being maligned, their lands taken away from them, their children taken away from them, their identity removed, and I could identify with their pride. So they were my most important inspiration. And I promised myself, Gertrude, that if I was fortunate enough to survive this cancer, then one day I would visit Wounded Knee in South Dakota. And to date, my wife and I, my remarried wife, have visited Wounded Knee on multiple occasions.
Oh, wow.
Uh, uh,
That's beautiful.
the other side of my inspiration from the Lakota Sioux, fast forward to 2018, and I got in touch with the Lakota people on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and I was invited to spend a week on the reservation with the indigenous people of South Dakota.
Wow. Wow.
And at the end of that visit, I was made an honorary member of the tribal council.
That is amazing. Absolutely amazing. So, how did surviving cancer shape you and make you the man that you became?
I think shape me, it most certainly did. Define me, it didn't. I think, and some people, particularly those people who have experienced a cancer diagnosis, may find this a strange thing to say.
Yeah.
But without the cancer diagnosis, I wouldn't be the man that I am today.
Yeah.
Very humbled, very proud of what I've achieved in my working life as a cancer nurse consultant, able to help other people. And it's just one of those things that I think I'm a great believer in fate. I think
Yeah.
at the beginning of life, you're dealt a hand of cards and you have no option other than to play that hand of cards. And I think for me, a cancer diagnosis was just part of my fate. And it led me on to great things, which I am extremely humbled about, but very grateful for.
Wow. So, what was the most difficult part of watching your daughter face the same terminal illness?
Again, going back to my chemotherapy, which was delivered in the very early 70s, when, and again, I don't want to be dismissive about cancer diagnosis or treatment today, but back in the 70s, there was almost no treatment or medication to help the side effects, which were absolutely brutal. Hence me, admitting that I contemplated suicide. And I couldn't sit here for the next 5 hours and describe how difficult it was. And yet that said, if I could have taken that chemotherapy on behalf of Donna, I would have happily done so, because to watch a child, a 4-year-old child, go through chemotherapy is just impossible. Again, there are no adjectives to describe the difficulty, the helplessness, the emotional turmoil that you go through. So if anything, I would have accepted that chemotherapy on her behalf if I could have done. That's how difficult it was to watch her and the other children on the ward.
I can imagine. So, what inspired you to return to the hospital as a cancer nurse specialist?
I very much wanted to give back. I had, as I said, wasted my school years. So I returned to college and got myself the qualifications that I needed to enter nursing. And I very much enjoyed a meteoric rise to the top of the nursing ladder. I worked on the ward where I received most of my chemotherapy. And then I subsequently moved in 2001 to South Tyneside Hospital, the very hospital that made my own diagnosis in the early 70s as a senior cancer nurse consultant, managing patients who had the same cancers as myself and Donna. And again, the humility that I took into that role was always first and foremost. And it was very much about me wanting to give something back to society, but to feel as though I'm achieving something from my experience as a cancer patient.
Yeah. So, how did your personal experience change the way that you cared for patients?
A very good question, Gertrude. I think very importantly, I would never, ever say to a patient that I knew what they were going through, because quite simply, I don't.
Yeah.
Every cancer patient is unique and they
And
all
experience.
experience things in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
However, there were many patients who knew of my diagnosis from when I wrote my book, Shadow of a Survivor, had some local media exposure, and many patients would ask me about how I coped, how I didn't cope, the investigations, the treatment, and I was always happy to share my experience with those people in the
Yeah.
hope that it was going to help them. And the feedback that I got from patients both in hospital and at social gatherings, gave me very, very positive feedback of my experience with them.
Yeah. What have cancer patients taught you about life?
Oh, um, never look back on your life unless you can be reflective, and never look forward unless you can dream. We all need dreams, we all need hope, and inspiration is part of looking forward and using that inspiration to drive yourself forward. I think most cancer patients would agree, at least I hope they will agree, that the cancer experience allows you to appreciate life.
Yeah.
And I think too few people understand that life really is a rehearsal.
Mm,
Sorry, I should say life is not a rehearsal. We're here for only a brief moment in time.
yeah.
Enjoy your life. It's a difficult entity.
Yeah. When you've had a brush with death, you realize that there is a very thin line between life and death.
Absolutely.
You don't take anything for granted and you learn to live in the moment.
Yeah, yes.
So, how do you hold space for others while carrying your own pain?
I am very fortunate that my wife is also my soulmate. I know a lot of people say that their wives, their husbands are soulmates. My wife truly is. She, again, because of my diagnosis, I retired 3 years ago because of a number of health-related conditions, all as a consequence of the salubrious chemotherapy and radiotherapy I received in the 70s, including another cancer diagnosis. My wife always tops up my glass because, admittedly, my glass is always half empty. I'm sorry to have to admit, but my wife is always there to top it up. She is also a cancer nurse specialist, so she is my cushion. She is my uh, everything I need for support. So that's where I get my inspiration these days from. But very importantly, the music of Hawkwind and of course the Lakota Sioux are still very, very inspiring to me.
Mm. Well, you certainly found each other on this journey called life. That is just absolutely amazing. Very, very
Would
fortunate.
can I share with yourself and the listeners, Gertrude, something that happened to me in 2008, again
Right.
related to Hawkwind, and again they have been a massive inspiration for me,
Mm.
and much to my wife's disgust, jokingly. I joined Hawkwind in 2008 as part of their road crew traveling around the country. And
Right.
on the final gig of that tour at Donington Festival, I was invited on stage with Hawkwind. Now, they have a number called 10 Seconds of Forever. It's all about the first 10 seconds of the universe. I rewrote the lyrics to that to reflect the first 10 seconds of a cancer diagnosis. And
Oh,
Hawkwind invited me on stage to play with that number, but to recite my lyrics. And if it's all right, I would like to recite those lyrics
that
for
would be
you.
lovely. Yes, please
Okay.
do.
Okay. So in the background would be weird and uh, synthesizers and music. And I would
Okay.
step to the front of the stage to narrate. In the 10th second of forever, I was informed that my world would end, and with it, my very existence. In the 9th second of forever, I felt a numbness overcome my body, the tingling sensation of fear and the chronic pain of this reality. In the 8th second of forever, I thought of a leaf, a stone, and the creaking branches of the ancient oak tree, and the innocence of life. In the 7th second of forever, I remembered an empty room where voices spoke to me about nothing. In the 6th second of forever, I thought of the life I would not lead and the effects of my confused mind. In the 5th second of forever, I thought of the toxic poison that attacked my fragile veins. In the 4th second of forever, I could remember nothing I did not love. And in the 3rd second of forever, I thought of my father, my mother, and my sister crying. In the penultimate second of forever, I saw the rain caressing the window, the marshmallow clouds drift through the sky. And in the first and final second of my diagnosis, I thought of the others, those that had not been so fortunate, and the long past that had led to now.
Wow. Wow, that is so powerful.
Thank you.
10 seconds, so much captured in such a short space of time. Now, what does healing mean to you now, John, after everything that you've been through?
Healing for me means continuing to enjoy my life, my children, my stepchildren, my grandchildren. It means moving forward. It means writing children's storybooks, which is what I do in my retirement now, and enjoying life as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, that is awesome. And how do you navigate facing another diagnosis after such a long journey?
With the thought of inevitability, really, because the drugs that were given to me in the 70s were known to be carcinogenic. So I have a lung condition called pulmonary fibrosis as a consequence of the radiotherapy. I have osteoporosis because of all of the steroids. I have a pituitary gland that doesn't work because of many of the drugs, and I have to have daily hormone therapy. I have bladder cancer because of one of the drugs. And in actual fact, I'm at hospital tomorrow for my review. And it is, I don't mean it to sound blasé or glib, but it is an inevitability. The most important point to make is I can't change that, but most importantly, I'm here to be enjoying life.
I love that. Now, what message do you most want to share with families facing cancer today?
Oh, I would love, absolutely love families who have been touched by a cancer diagnosis and individuals themselves to read my book, Shadow of a Survivor, because it is a self-funded book. It is not a commercial venture. It is there to inspire others. It is my three-dimensional story of survival that aims to provide that all-important inspiration to anyone touched by a cancer diagnosis.
It's truly inspiring, John, to listen to everything you've gone through, what your daughter has gone through.
Thank you.
You came out on the other side, and now you're really using that experience to uplift and inspire others, because I think that's the biggest thing that I'm getting from you today is upliftment and hope. Because a lot of people get stuck in fear when they get their diagnosis. Your story is truly, truly inspirational in that sense, that you give people hope. Now, if you could go back to the younger you, the young man who was diagnosed, unsure where life was going to take him, we could teleport you back so you could go and give yourself 3 nuggets of wisdom. Based on what life has taught you up until this point, John, what would those 3 nuggets of wisdom be?
That is, well, I will try and answer that, Gertrude, because my first knee-jerk reaction would be that I'm going to decline to answer because you can't change the future. However, my first piece of wise, and call it wisdom if you like, would be to reflect on whatever it is and everything that you do in life. Because admittedly, as a young, immature and very naive 18-year-old traveling around the country following Hawkwind, I did dabble with 1 or 2 drugs, I'll be totally honest with you. And I think if my life hadn't been touched by cancer, and again, fate taking a part, where would my life have ended? Where would my life have gone with those illicit substances? So again, I'm grateful for fate taking me in the direction it did. So I think reflection and think long and hard about the decisions that you make is a very important one. And I really am struggling to think of anything else that would be wholly honest, because I do truly believe, Gertrude, that it would be so easy to give yourself advice, but giving yourself that advice won't change anything. You are where you are, and you can't change that.
But I think the lesson that I'm getting from you is you learn to live in the moment, John. You know, a lot of times we live in our pasts worrying about things we can't go back and change, or we worry about the future that may or may not come. And your life has taught you to be very, very present, to just enjoy it moment by moment.
Yes, you're very true. I probably misinterpreted your question. I thought you meant 3 nuggets that could change my life. And
No.
I don't want
This is
to change my life.
the younger you, your philosophy on what life has taught you.
Yeah. No, I think, as you rightly say, living in the moment.
Yeah, that's what I get. That's what I got from this whole conversation. So now let's put.
I was just going to say, I like to think that, my life was once given up for lost. But now it's a story. And again, I don't mean this to sound blasé, but it's now a story that's saving others. And I really sincerely wanted to keep doing that through the pages of Shadow of a Survivor.
Yeah, it's almost makes it all worthwhile that you went through what you went through, because now your story becomes somebody else's survival guide. It gives people hope, helps them stay focused, looking forwards and not back. I love that. So let's continue with our little thought experiment, John, and I'm going to teleport you into the future this time. So we went back, now we're going forwards. And we are going to go and sit with a 90-year-old you. And he is sitting in his rocking chair, surrounded by his children, his grandchildren, whoever's going to be with you at the end, your beautiful soulmate and wife. If I could take you into the future to have a conversation with the 90-year-old you, what will you say to him when you finally meet him? Not ask him questions. If you could just sit and have a cup of tea with him, what will you say to him when you finally meet him?
Wow. I think that's a great question. I'm a very emotional man. My emotions regularly get the better of me. And I make no apologies for that. I think that's a good thing. But I think if I could sit in one chair looking at my 90-year-old self, I would be very emotional. But I think I would say to myself, you've done well. You've achieved all you wanted to achieve, particularly in view of the fact that you are an honorary member of the Tribal Council of Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and the fact that you have survived all these years, and the fact that you can see your grandchildren succeed in life.
I love it. And I'll tell you the reason why I like asking people this question, John. A lot of us don't realize that the wise woman, the wise man is already in us. He is that quiet voice that whispered to you, keep going, go left, go right, go back to college, study, make a difference. And you listened to him. This is why you're here now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so when we meet that future self, I play with the energy of who I am becoming, John. I was very fortunate to have had several brushes with death at a very early age, not mine, but people in my family and my community. And I learned very early on that this life is fleeting. It's brief.
It is.
And we have a lot of time to live it. So I have conversations with her when I get stuck. Sometimes I go into my meditation and prayer at night and I ask her questions as simple as, so what is the next step? What do I do now? And then I wake up in the morning and I have those light bulb moments, John, where I'm in the shower and I know exactly what my next step should be. But
well, I'm going to tell you something, Gertrude. I think that's a great philosophy. And I, for one, I'm going to embrace that.
Yeah, we were born with everything we need to live the life we chose to lead. You know, you said earlier on, we're dealt a hand, a deck of cards.
Yes.
And you don't have a choice. You can't change those cards. You have to play the game. And that's what life is. It's a game. And whatever life throws at you, you have the choice.
And importantly, it's a wonderful game to play because life is wonderful.
It is. Well, this has been an absolutely awesome interview, John. Thank you so much for coming online and sharing your incredible story.
Oh, thank you, Gertrude, and thank you for all your listeners. I would love to hear from anyone and everyone about their experiences too.
And thank you to everybody who tuned in. The Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We're a social impact movement that brings you the stories and voices of people from all over the world. We share these stories to uplift you, to inspire you, to energize you, but most importantly, to help take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So if you are somebody who has been diagnosed with cancer and you're looking for some inspiration, go onto John's website, get his book. Or if you know somebody who is going through the storm, please tag them on this video, share this video on your social media so we can reach more people and share the inspiration as well. I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody, with yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Thanks again, John, for the interview.
Bye, everybody.
Bye for now, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.